Welcome back to another advanced math video tutorial. This time we will discuss complex number. A complex number, z, is written in the form of c equals to x plus yi, where x and y are real number. X and y are real numbers, and I is an imaginary number. From the value I, squared is equivalent to -1. If we get the value of I, that is equivalent to square root of -1. So the real number x is the real part, while yi is the imaginary part of the complex number. And by definition, a complex number z is an ordered pair xy written as this one, and x is called the real part and y is the imaginary part of z, written as real part of z and imaginary part of z. The real part of z is again equivalent to x, and the imaginary part of z is equivalent to y. So if we raise the power, let's say I, from our original definition, that is equivalent to square root of -1. If we square I, so meaning I squared, so we have negative or square root of -1 to be squared, and that's equivalent to -1. Again, if we cube the I, or the imaginary number, so we get I squared times I, and I squared is equivalent to -1 times I, so that's -I. Then I to the fourth is equivalent to I squared times I squared, and that's equivalent to -1 times -1 is equivalent to 1. If we get the value of I to the fifth, that's equivalent to I to the fourth times I. And I to the fourth times I to the fourth is 1 times I is equivalent to I, while I to the sixth is equivalent to I to the fourth times I squared, when I squared is equivalent to -1. So I to the seventh is equivalent to I to the fourth times I cubed is equivalent to -I. I to the eighth is equivalent to I to the fourth times I to the fourth, and I to the fourth is equivalent to 1 times 1, and that's equivalent to 1. So kung makikita nyo, we can observe a pattern. If our exponent is divisible by 4, so we have the value of 1. Then if our exponent is 1, 5, let's say our exponent is 1, 5, 9, and so on, the value of I raised to n is equivalent to I. The value is 2, 6, 10, and so on. The value of in is equivalent to -1. And if the value is 3, 7, 13, the value is equivalent to in is equivalent to -I. And again, if our exponent, this is the exponent, 4, 8, 16, 12, 16, and so on, our value of in is equivalent to 1. So this is the pattern that we will follow in solving for an imaginary that is raised to n. So we have an example to illustrate para natin makukuha yung I na merong power. Let's have an example 1. So, if we have 1a wherein I is raised to 273. So, we have 273. So, first is we divide 273 into 4. And we will get 273 divided by 4 is equivalent to 68 and 1/4, meaning I raised to 68 or I raised to 4 raised to 68 times meron tayong natirang isa I, kasi kung simplify natin to, that's also equivalent to I 272 times I, or that's equivalent to I to the fourth is 1 raised to 68 times I is equivalent to I. So this is equivalent to I. So example 1b. This time we will solve I raised to 200 plus I raised to 313 plus I raised to 502. If we divide 200 divided by 4, we know that this is exactly equivalent to 50. So that is also equivalent to I raised to 4 raised to 50. Since I raised to 4 raised to 50 is also equivalent to I raised to 200. How about 313? So 313 divided by 4 is equivalent to 78 and 1/4. So meaning we have plus I raised to 4 raised to 313 times I plus I raised to 502. So 502 divided by 4, that's equivalent to 125 and 1/2 or 2/4. So meaning may dalawang matitirang I tayo. So that's I the 4th raised to 125 times I squared. So if we simplify the equation, that is, we know that I to the 4th is 1 raised to 50 is simply 1 times 1 times 1 and so on. You need to multiply 1 50 times plus I to the 4th raised to 313. So we need to multiply 1 times 1 times 1. We know that's 1 times I is plus, this is also equivalent to 1 times I squared is negative 1. Therefore, for letter B, the value is I. So next, so we have I raised to 315 plus I raised to 217 plus I raised to 400 plus I raised to 202. So I raised to 315 is equivalent to, if we divide that, 78. 315 divided by 4, 78 and 3/4, meaning I raised to 4, 78 times I cubed. Then 217 divided by 4 is equivalent to 54 and 1/4. So meaning that is equivalent to I raised to 4 raised to 54 times I plus yung 400 natin divided by 4 is exactly divisible by 4. So plus I raised to 4 raised to 100 times. Tapos yung 202 natin divided by 4 is simply equivalent to 50 and 2/4. So plus I raised to 4 50 times I squared. So this is equivalent to, this is 1, again, this is negative I from the previous, plus this is 1 times I, so we have I, this is 1, this is 200, this is 1 times I squared is negative 1. So we have 0. So for letter C, we have 0. Last, we have letter D. So this time, we need to solve 1 over I. So hindi kasi pwedeng yung ating I ay nasa ilalim. So anong gagawin natin dito? So 1 over I is also equivalent to 1 over I multiply numerator and denominator by I. So 1 times I is I over I squared. And I squared is equivalent to negative 1. So I divided by negative 1, that is negative I. Next is 1 over I squared. So 1 over I squared is equivalent to 1 over negative I squared is negative 1. So that is equivalent to negative 1. For last, 1 over I cube. So for 1 over I cube, pwede natin multiply ng I cube pareho para mawala yung ilalim. Kaya lang, ang mas madali sa kanya is yung kumpletuhin lang natin. Ano yung kulang sa kanya para makompleto o maging 1 yung ilalim? Diba? Kailangan lang niyang maging I to the 4th. So para maging I to the 4th siya, multiply na natin siya ng I. So that is I over I to the 4th. And I to the 4th is equivalent to 1. So this is equivalent to I. So that is the solution for these 3 problem. So next, we want to find the real part and imaginary part of Z. So ano daw yung real part at imaginary part ng ating C? Let's have first given A. C is equivalent to 2 plus 3i. So for our real part, di ba sabi kanina, real part of C is equivalent to x. And ang x natin dito ay yung 2. For imaginary part of C, the imaginary part of C is y, not yi. So that is equivalent to 3. So this is the answer for letter A. For letter B, so we have negative 2i. For negative 2i, our real part of C, so is equivalent again to x. We don't have real part in our letter B, so that is equivalent to 0. And then for our imaginary part, that is equivalent to negative 2. We include the sign. This is the answer for letter B. For letter C, the given is I raised to 12 minus I raised to 23. And I raised to 12, that's 12 divided by 4, so 3. Meaning we have I to the 4th to be cubed. Then for 23, that's 23 divided by 4, that is 5 and 3/4. Meaning we have 3 as a remainder. So minus I to the 4th raised to the 23 times I cubed. So I to the 4th, that is 1 minus I minus 1 times negative I. We have 1 plus I. And our real part for this problem is 1. And our imaginary part for this problem is positive 1. So thank you. So please like, share, and subscribe.